Welcome back to Topics Worth Hearing Both Sides About.
Part 2.
Part 2. And for Part 2, an initial one here, we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to talk about women in ministry.
Oh boy. Before we get into that, if you haven't seen our first part on this video, go see our first part on this video.
It'll be linked below.
Yeah, because after you watch this next segment, you're never going to watch this again.
No, we are going to make the pro and not pro case for...
Anti?
Yeah, I didn't like the phrase anti, but I guess it is technically correct.
Okay.
All right. So, what is the current argument? What we should probably define this. It's not the most misunderstood part of this discussion about women in ministry is I believe people conflate these two terms as the same thing and they mean different. Women in ministry and women pastors.
Yes, for the topic of this conversation, we're discussing women pastors.
Women pastors, yes. Not women in ministry.
And this relates mostly to correct me if I'm wrong, though, the Methodist and Wesleyan denominations versus the other denominations.
Correct.
That's a broad
really
there,
broad stroke. And we're going to do our best to make the best case for both sides.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, do you want to start with the Wesleyan side or the
I'm fine with either.
side? Okay.
I'm fine with either.
Let's start with the Wesleyan Methodist side. Okay. So, this is the side that is pro women as head pastors of churches.
Yes.
Okay. Their strongest arguments are... What comes to mind?
An easy one is Deborah in the Old Testament.
Okay.
So,
she was a judge.
She was a judge, a very prominent religious figure in the Old Testament that a lot of people equate to. She was a female in a very much so lead role in the Old Testament, which would lead to logical sense that women can attain lead roles in today.
Mm-hmm. They'd also point to Jesus had many women with him in his ministry.
Mm-hmm. And were very involved in the ministry. The biggest argument against the opposing one, the most, I think, influential verse in this is is in Corinthians, where that whole passage that Paul writes. And I won't get into that. But essentially the argument to that is that at the time, the Corinthians were experiencing a very specific difficulty with some women in leadership who were causing issues within the church. And the argument is made that Paul was trying to specifically talk to the Corinthians.
Okay.
That is the argument that is made there. And that it wasn't for all church bodies.
It was for one church.
It was for that specific instance.
Now, I've also heard people use the verse of, neither Jew nor Greek nor
male nor
slave.
Female. Yes.
I've heard people use that as well, saying, look, hey, it's in the Bible. Women can now be head pastors. I've heard them use that.
Okay.
Now, those, I think, were 3 or 4 quick snippets of the defense of women as head pastors.
Yes.
Okay? Again, that's more on the Wesleyan Methodist side.
Yep.
Any more we want to add to that side real quick?
That
just comes front of mind.
Front of mind. No, nothing. I think we covered the big ones.
Okay. Now let's hit the big ones on the women in ministry, just not women as head pastors.
Yes.
So the opposite case of that. More what was called the Southern Baptist, the case.
Yeah, roughly.
A little more on that side. Yeah.
Yeah. The biggest argument for this one, I think, is the passage in Corinthians that we referenced, in which Paul,
I do not
paraphrase, pretty much just says women can't teach.
Yes.
So that's your number one argument, I think.
That's where a lot of people will start the entire discussion.
Yep.
Another argument people will use is Jesus had 12 disciples.
Yep.
And he personally, while included women in incredibly important roles, did not name one as a leader specifically of the 12. Because he could have selected 6 men, 6 women, but as his example,
Yep,
he
the
picked
12
men.
disciples were all men.
Yeah.
Yep. I think you're... I don't know. I'm going to bring this one up because I think it's a good point, but historically speaking, aside from the example of Deborah, which that's another conversation, all of church history throughout the Bible is only men. There were no female priests, rabbis, pastors, teachers of that type throughout the biblical history. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
There were, I don't know if priestess wouldn't be the right term, so no, they wouldn't, because that would have been Aaron and his sons and the lineage there.
Yep.
There were plenty of women serving in the Levites, serving in the temple with the Levites, of course. There
Yes,
was a whole
and I'm not
family lineage,
saying not involved in the religious
but this is
portion, but
specifically the
specifically
head,
like
the actual one in charge.
what we would refer to as pastors in today's age. It was a different time.
Yeah.
But
A lot of other people will use the examples of the Bible of, you have God at the head of the house, the man, the head, are there under God, the woman under him there. So
Absolutely.
It creates basically not a pyramid of goodness.
the basis of the argument is God structured
God's family structure. Thank you.
men as the leaders, and that is the argument. That's the basis of the argument. That's how God's design was intended. That is the argument.
And then
So we don't want to contradict God's intended design.
Right. Because the argument that leads to is, what if you're married and your female spouse is the pastor?
Right.
Who is now the head and spiritual head of that household?
In that situation, it would be the woman, which is contrary to the intent laid out in Genesis.
So that's the quick 7-minute head point discussion of that argument there.
Yep.
It's a good discussion.
It is. And it's a commonly discussed one, which is why we're bringing it up. It's one of the most often discussed to this day topics of theology.
And when I've discussed this with friends outside of this right here, it is almost always, there's always an emotion behind this one.
Absolutely.
And regardless of what side we're speaking on, it's really helpful if you can try to understand who the other person is. Even if you think they're wrong, because you are, at the end of the day, you are trying to connect with them. You're not trying to beat them over the head usually with an answer. You're trying to connect with them and then together get to the truth. Now, maybe you are already holding the truth, but you got to work together to help them see it through their eyes too.
Yep.
That's actually kind of goes for all of these topics here.
Yep, absolutely. So, number 2 topic on our list here is the once saved, always saved ideology. This is a rough one.
This one is pretty rough. Okay. Versus that.
Well, first, I'm going to lay out the basis of this
Okay.
discussion, which is that one side believes that once an individual receives salvation, they are always saved. For the rest of eternity, they have been granted salvation and forgiveness of sins, and regardless of their actions after that point, they have been forgiven.
And they're going to heaven.
And they're going to heaven. The alternate flip side to that is that, and this is kind of into the justification versus faith argument, but there's a point of salvation that a person is forgiven for sins and granted salvation and eternal life in heaven, but that salvation can be lost if that person walks away from their faith. Essentially, there's a point at which they begin belief in Jesus, and then they no longer believe in Jesus.
And we'll get into that, the nuance of that one there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make what's the best case for once saved, always saved?
The best case.
The best case. And it's the verse I've heard is basically no one can pluck you out of my hand.
Okay.
The implication, again, on this one here, implication is no one, including you, can ever pluck you out of my hand once you're in my hand.
Okay.
Which means once you're there, once you're saved, you don't get to get out. That's it. Discussion's over. You're in.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that verse been used many times to defend once saved, always saved.
Okay. And it logically tracks.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next one I'm gonna again, I brought this up several times, but I'm gonna bring up John 3:16.
Okay.
Because it's the best snapshot to salvation that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't say, and you shall be saved as long as you keep doing it. It just says you shall be saved.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah, it seems more definitive.
There are a lot of passages in the New Testament that seem to suggest that salvation occurs once, and it's not a item that has to be upkept.
Mm-hmm. It's not a monthly subscription with Netflix.
Yes, yeah. I'm trying to think the best, without getting too deep into this verse and that verse and that verse, what the theological viewpoint behind it.
Well, I'll say people who hold this view often, unfortunately, but this one's going to get a little sad for a moment. This is a view often used to find comfort after someone has passed away, especially if that someone has, in their more recent time before their passing, not lived a life that one would probably call very Christian. But sometime in their past, the family or someone is aware that they had a confession of faith.
Mm-hmm.
This is often where I'll see these verses or this philosophy, this theology, really clung onto as comfort. Because at the end of the day, almost no one wants to believe someone they care or love about is in hell. So a lot of people will cling to this belief of, well, when they were 18, Aunt Jen said that they went up to
They prayed the prayer.
They prayed the prayer.
Raised their hand.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's it. They just cling to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some examples that I can think of, and I'm trying to get the best ones out that I can. One would be the scripture that talks about when you're saved, your name is written in the book of life.
Ooh, see, I hadn't ever seen that one used for that. That's a good point. That's a good discussion item.
Yes, because it would indicate that once your name is in the book, but the argument could also be made that your name could be removed. But that would be an example that you would have to really dig into that one. The other one would be the prodigal son, which is he was a part of the family, he left, and then was instantly welcomed back.
I'm not sure I'd use that one on that verse, but I can see how you could tie it in there.
I'm trying to provide theological ideas
Okay.
that would support that without getting into the weeds of it.
All right. We tossed some options there for people to chew on. The opposing side.
So this would be the mindset that you can lose your salvation.
I would say it's a two-parter. It's either you can lose your salvation or you were never saved.
I struggle with that one.
So, Bible verse. Not all those who call. So we have one verse says, "Call on the name of the Lord and be saved."
Mm-hmm.
Different verse later on. Not all of those who call Lord, Lord are saved.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like what? I don't have the answer on that one fully. But, so that's an argument of, well, were you saved? Maybe. But also, all sins will be forgiven except those who are, grieving against the Spirit or something along that line?
Yeah, the unforgivable sin, but that's another topic.
Right. But that does tie into the walking away. The can you lose it? I would use that. I'd use those two verses as my defense for lose it.
I don't personally believe this, but I've heard the argument that the unforgivable sin is non-acceptance of Jesus's supreme, the Lord's supreme authority as God.
I don't know. I have not put I don't have a good, organized, well thought out answer for what that sin is yet.
Yeah, and I think that's a conversation for another time. Okay. But for this specific one, some of your biggest arguments for either having never been saved in the first place or being able to lose your salvation is, I almost think of the parable where it's, I'm hesitant to use that as a.
If the example's not strong enough, not use it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to use that one.
Okay. No, this topic here is one that it's not easy because this isn't a topic that you usually talk about when everything is great in life. There's usually a topic you talk about when something's gone bad in life. A family member's not living the way you want them to. Someone's dead. This is where lots and lots of emotions on this here. And, I've been to a handful of funerals in my day. And I don't think I've ever been to a funeral where the person giving the eulogy ever said that the person there was not going to heaven, regardless of the lifestyle they lived. And it's usually referencing the once saved, always saved mentality on it.
The best example I could probably offer is Judas. So Judas was a disciple of Jesus.
Hand-selected.
Followed Jesus for many years and then chose to betray him. And obviously, I don't think anyone would argue didn't go to hell.
You mean didn't go to heaven?
Well, no one would argue that he didn't go to hell.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that one's probably to me, that's the strongest argument you could make there.
Yeah, because unless you're implying that Judas from the beginning was a treacherous fool the whole time, which I don't think that would track. I don't know. I haven't put thought to the pre-decision Judas too much.
Yeah, which it often reverts to when you make an argument of someone could lose their salvation, it often reverts to, well, that just means they were never saved to begin with.
I think one more difficult item is you have these answers post-resurrection and pre-resurrection. That answer might be a bit different.
Okay.
because salvation was probably defined a bit different pre-resurrection, because he hadn't redeemed. Jesus hadn't been fully redeemed yet.
Okay.
As opposed to post-resurrection, it's a bit more clear-cut, I think.
Okay.
But there's some nuance. Nuance is the right way because, Abraham's faith was counted him as righteousness or something like that, or his actions. So there's some, that gets a little difficult. That gets difficult there.
Yeah. And that's, I think, why we're discussing it. We're not going to solve the answer to this
what
age-old theological question, but there are arguments to be made that you either can lose your salvation or were never saved if you walk away from it.
Because the one fear, if you have the belief you can lose your salvation, is you are afraid of losing your salvation.
Yes.
And I don't think I've heard anyone make the discussion of those who believe that you can lose it. I don't believe they have ever heard them make it was a nonchalant decision to lose it. It seems to always be intentional.
They reference you must pick up your cross daily. That's what I think that verse is commonly cited.
Okay.
That salvation is an active choice every day. And again, I don't think we're going to solve the answer to this question in this video, but those are the arguments that are made on both sides of that.
Yeah.
So, number 3 for this video, which is probably the last one, is going to be the end times. We're going to try to keep this brief because you could talk for a long time on the end times.
Okay.
Now, how do we want to do this? Do you want to do the pre, mid, and post? Do you want to do the main topics of the end times?
I feel like on these ones here, you almost have to default to pre, mid, and post. But pre, mid, and post what? Is my main question. Like before the
tribulation.
Yeah. We're ignoring the word rapture in this discussion, by the way.
I feel like we have to get into.
You have to get into rapture? Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Because there's a whole discussion right now about whether or not the word rapture actually is more like the movies Left Behind, where it's like, poof, and you're gone.
Well, yes. I'm gonna start. I've got a quick reference here for us to just start this conversation on the different the pre, mid, and post tribulation. So essentially, you have people who believe the pre tribulation, which is the rapture happens before the tribulation begins. Believers are spared the years of judgment. Mid tribulation, which is the rapture occurs at some point during the tribulation, which may sound self-explanatory, but I think it's often argued the last trumpet is probably at what point. But believers don't have to endure the worst wrath of the tribulation.
That's the mid.
Yes, that's the mid.
Post.
And then you have the post-tribulation, which is the rapture happens after the full tribulation in its entirety. So believers are fully present throughout the entire tribulation of the end times and are then gathered, the elect, afterwards.
So the pre-trib discussion here, this would be basically the book series Left Behind, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. The premise is, boom, God takes his people, and then what does the world look like without all of the Christians?
Yes.
Beginning then into the tribulation, one world government, etc. And I think on this one here, the main question, not the main question, a question is, it's usually, where would you prefer to be in this discussion? I think is actually where a lot of people are like, well, I want to be gone before all of it happens, or I want to stay and try to help save people by going through and mid it.
Okay.
What's your thoughts here?
So I'm going to actually, for the topic of this conversation, refrain from giving my opinion. I'm going to rather just give.
Because you don't believe in the rapture? I'm kidding.
No, but I think our goal here is more so just to inform and discuss.
Okay.
So, and you could, I don't think we're really going to convince anybody one way or another just by giving my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to give the end times in general is essentially, for Christians, the book of Revelation.
Yes. And
this is essentially the time in which God's plan for earth and us as humans is coming to an end.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On earth.
Yep. As things are in their current form,
in their current.
This is the climax.
Yes.
Of all of this.
Everyone pretty much agrees that at some point this occurs, after which is what we would consider eternity, in which whether you spend that in heaven or hell. I think some of the biggest discussed points, like we talked about, are the rapture, whether or not everyone is saved at the end with the whole every knee shall bow argument, and then when the end times itself takes place. I think those are the three things that are the most critical to discuss.
Okay.
Would you agree?
I'm cool with that. I like that.
Because you can go back and forth about what, like, you have the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, what each of those means. You could probably also, if you wanted to, you could get into the length, the overall length of the end times. I don't know that we're going to accomplish much by trying to discuss that, but I think...
Go ahead.
I think for us, it's when's the likelihood that the end times takes place, or the most frequently discussed, when the rapture occurs. Mm-hmm. I think those are the main points that we discuss here.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts?
I've heard 3 to 4 different commentaries on this book, and each one's 50 hours. And each one is vastly different than the one I heard before. And every time I listen to this, I'm like, I don't know which one's right. I don't have a clue. I like to preface it, all discussions of eschatology, or the end of the world, just to use a fun one there, the apocalypse.
Yep.
This is also sometimes called the Apocalypse of John, which I think is a really fun name. Protestants need to bring that back in. Yeah. That's such a fun one. The Apocalypse of John.
Well, why don't we start with the rapture? Okay. So you've got the 3 options: before tribulation, in the middle of the tribulation, and at the end of the tribulation. Mm-hmm. People who believe in the pre-tribulation they make the argument that the intent of the end times is the tribulation of the earth for its final atonement. And I think actually it's probably, I might be incorrect, but maybe the most prevalent thought in the Protestant church.
Oh, I would say so. If we just took a random survey of people we've attended church with, I'd say 60-70% would all say that.
Yeah, they're going to say the end time starts with Christ's return, in which is simultaneously the rapture, and then begins the tribulation and the series of events, the seals, the trumpets, the woman and the dragon, the whole thing.
Yes.
That's probably your most commonly believed portion.
Correct. And we're not saying that's right or wrong. We are saying
that's just saying that's the most commonly believed.
Yeah.
And that's thought to have not yet happened.
Correct.
As of 2026.
Yes.
That was a joke, but anyway, never mind. The other one is mid-tribulation. This is probably the least, I would say, believed, which is...
And I think it's probably because it feels too wishy-washy.
It's wishy-washy, and I think it's mostly off of some, like, technical terms and, like, a few words here and here that make people believe, essentially, that Christ's return happens, the tribulation begins, then we're like partway through, and then the rapture happens, which to me just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm not going to say it's incorrect, but it seems odd. It just doesn't seem to track.
Sure.
Tell me what would you say?
It would seem, if you were a mid-tribber, it would seem more like, look, you've come this far, just hang in there a little bit longer. It feels like you're still getting smacked around a bit, but God didn't really save you, but he's going to save you, but you didn't really save you. It's not clean. It's not clean at all. My personal opinion.
Yeah, I think it's mainly trying to make the argument of the last trumpet versus the Great Tribulation. I think those are the key terms that are used in that, which is where John writes the last trumpet or the final trumpet, and then there's some verbiage that might indicate the rapture's occurrence.
Okay.
And then the beginning of the Great Tribulation.
Okay.
So that's the mid-trib.
Okay.
Then you have the post-trib, which is probably the second most popular.
And this is Christians suffer all the way through.
Yep. This is you 100%.
Until Jesus comes back the last time, wipes out the devil, white horse situation, everything.
Yes, I think most people who believe this believe it because of they don't believe there's a 2-second comings, I guess is the best way of saying it. They don't think they believe it all happens at once. So the culmination of the end times and the rapture, the gathering of the elect, is the completion.
Okay.
They make the argument that pre-tribulation doesn't make sense because you have the rapture and Christians being taken up to heaven, or however you want to believe that, whatever happens. And then you have the end, which is like the final return of Christ. So it kind of splits it there. They don't believe that. I think there's a passage in Matthew that refers to immediately after the tribulation gathering the elect or something along those lines. I think is the most commonly referenced for those who believe in the post-tribulation.
Okay.
I think the passage in Thessalonians about no tribulation, like Christians not enduring. I don't remember the exact phrase of it, but it's essentially Christians not having to endure the tribulations of the end times are the biggest critic for the mid and tribulation beliefs.
And for people who believe post-trib. Almost none of them talk about it. It's almost like, I regret to believe this. Because they don't want to have to suffer through that. I mean, who really would? But they don't want to have suffered through all the entire book of Revelation, knowing that, hey, God could have taken us sooner. So it's more like, I don't like it, but I believe it. That's usually what I'll hear with this discussion.
Yeah, and I'd say your biggest argument for the pre-tribulation is why would God choose to allow, or why would God choose to make his children endure what is vividly described as the wrath of God on earth if they are his chosen people?
And another verse there for implying the pre-trib talks about how two people will be in a field, one goes the other. Two people basically hang out or in bed, one gone, not the other.
Mm-hmm. A lot of other referenced is the have your lantern or your lamp ready, because you don't know when the hour is.
Right.
A lot of people think implies that Christians' ascension, or the God's chosen people's ascension to heaven or whatever, is the mark of the beginning of the end times.
That I can see that logically tracking using that verse / story on that.
Yeah.
See, now I'm gonna have to go home and like reread Revelation again.
Well, yeah, and I think the pre-tribulation one is the easiest one to believe.
It's the one most people would also just prefer to believe. It is the most
Yes.
favorable one.
It is. It's the most favorable one, and it's the one that makes the easiest sense to understand without digging into the weeds of it. But that's not to say that the other ones don't have legitimate points.
Not to go too off topic on this, but currently, did you know there is a bet on Polymarket about the year that Jesus comes back?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like for a Christian that's a win-win situation.
Exactly.
Like worst case scenario
It's not your problem anymore.
The worst case scenario is you're right and you only win a few dollars. Yeah,
but it was like 6 to 8%. It wasn't a bad. I mean, it wasn't a bad general return. Not financial advice, but but I know what I'm doing later.
It's ironic though because for an atheist, that's like a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
You either lose money or you go to hell.
When in doubt, pray for your atheistic buddies.
Absolutely.
In these discussions, the last two videos, they've been a little bit more fun. A little bit more, hey, here's some ideas, different ways to think. And we didn't do as much, hey, here's what we think. We sprinkled that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But more on the, hey, let's hear the other side, because there might be something to learn from the other side. And those who are much wiser than us have been at this for thousands of years. It's worth hearing the discussion. Don't just shut it down unless you have to. Just hear the discussion, and nothing else, it can help solidify your personal belief system on that.
Absolutely. These conversations are truly just that, conversations between the two of us about these topics, and you guys are just along for the ride.
So appreciate you coming along with us, and we'll see what the next one has in store.
Till next time.
Till next time.